Hello and welcome to DTV, your source for news and information about the Democratic Party and politics in Knoxville. I'm Michael Davis, and I'm your host for DTV's closer look at the candidates running in Knoxville's City Council election on November the 7th. DTV would like to remind you that early voting starts on October the 18th and runs through November the 2nd. And you can find out more about early voting and its locations at www.knoxcounty.org/election. We have with us for this segment District 3 candidates, James Corcoran and Seema Singh Perez. James, Seema, thank you for being here with us today, and welcome to DTV.
Thanks for inviting us.
So I'm sure that your lives are pretty exciting right now with everything going on.
Extremely busy.
I'll bet.
Just a whirlwind.
Right. There was a candidate forum just last night, correct? So,
correct.
All right. Well, I'm sure the issues are fresh in your mind as always, so we'll just jump right into them here today. District 3 would most commonly be referred to as the northern part of West Knoxville. So we have several issues to get to, but very briefly, please tell our viewers about your district and why you want to represent it. So, Seema, we'll start with you.
District 3 is northwest Knoxville. It roughly goes from Ball Camp to Lonsdale and then Clinton Highway. It's a unique district. It is where I grew up, and then I left and moved back into the house next door. So I want to represent it because I think what we care about, we represent.
Thank you. Okay. And James?
Well, obviously it's the district where I live as well. I guess I don't need to really go through over the geography of it again, but one of the things that's been coming up in the news lately is basically the northwest Knoxville, particularly the 37921 zip code, is the one that's been hardest hit in terms of overdose deaths. So my practice, I'm an attorney, and most of my practice has been dealing with a lot of the children and families that have been affected and hardest hit by the opioid problem. So I see that experience in sort of the unique way in that it's been hitting northwest Knoxville in particular is something that's interested in me in getting more involved in our local government.
Okay. All right. So in addition, we will definitely be discussing the opioid addiction issues. So it's no secret, that this is a major problem across the country. Knoxville's seeing its fair share of these issues. Do you think Knoxville's doing enough and is doing it right? What sort of innovations might you suggest in dealing with this problem? James?
Well, I think we've actually been seeing more than our share of it. In fact, Knoxville has been consistently ranked in the top 10 most drug-riddled cities in the nation. So while it is very much a problem that's nationwide, it's something I think we've been seeing more than our fair share of it. I think it's something we can be addressing sort of, I look at it from a carrot and a stick type approach. We need to be doing more in terms of prevention, in terms of law enforcement, making sure we can be a little bit more proactive in terms of investigating the sources of the drugs in our community. But additionally, I think we can also do better to make sure that we have more treatment options available. One thing that we've recently seen is the safety center, which the county kind of spearheaded it, but the city and the state both helped with placement of that actually in our district. Now there's a lot of concern about the way they chose the actual physical location of it, but I do think it does provide a bit of a roadmap in terms of showing how our city, our county, and our state governments can work together to start tackling the problem. And I'd like to see more of that type of collaboration.
Seema.
Okay. I think the safety center is a very good start. Right now, the police dealing with it and the firefighters, that's been really difficult on them, not only in Knoxville but across the country. We do need more treatment. I think we do not need to be arresting people and just, the Knox County jails are full right now. That's not the answer. I think we need to look at models across the country. Right now in Buffalo, they have set up a full system of a network where it's daily observed treatment and therapy, and the judge that's involved is in recovery himself. And it's just a very interesting model that I would like to look more into and see if it's something we can use in Knoxville.
Okay, thank you. So we all know that every district in Knoxville faces its own unique challenges, but as a city council member, you have to deal with the biggest challenges facing the entire city. Now, opioid epidemic aside, what do you believe are some of the biggest challenges that are facing Knoxville, and how do you plan to address them? Seema, we'll start with you.
Okay. I think violence. It was a very violent summer in Knoxville, and we need to address that. I think one of the places we need to start addressing that on the City Council is every policy and decision that's made, we need to look into how that's going to impact violence. Violence begins in the home. The one thing in common of every violent incident that occurs outside the home is that that person had been exposed to violence in the home. And we seem to have this attitude that when there's violence in the home, well, that's a personal issue. But it's not. It comes out into the community, if that's not important enough itself that it's in the home. So I think that is something we need to work on a great deal. Also, the economics of the full city. I think we need to lift everybody in this city.
Okay, thank you. James.
Well, I certainly agree that violence is a problem. However, given folks' individual privacy rights, there's only so much we can do actually in the home. I do think that a lot of our neighborhoods, particularly a lot of folks I've talked to in Lonsdale, have been asking for a lot more of a return to community policing in terms of actually seeing, beat cops, folks actually out, in the neighborhoods, familiarizing themselves with the people who are there and present. I do think we need to continue. The city's made a push to try to recruit folks from their own neighborhoods to help foster a better relationship between law enforcement and their community, and I think we need to continue to encourage that and make sure that we have enough resources in terms of law enforcement. I think additionally, to switch tracks a little bit from the development side, we've seen a lot of focus downtown. And while it's great that our downtown is doing well, but when you start taking a look further away from the city center, particularly down some of our corridors, you see a lot more of a lot more predatory type businesses. If you go down Broadway, if you go down Chapman Highway, if you go down Magnolia, we see a lot of pawn shops and check into cash type places, and I think some of that's in part related to the fact that we've focused a little bit too much of our efforts into downtown at the expense of the rest of the city.
Thank you. Knoxville is currently reviewing its city zoning policies, talking about developing and planning. Please share with us some of your thoughts on what you hope will be the best long-term results of this, and what principles should the city use to guide this policy. James?
Well, I currently sit on the Board of Zoning Appeals for the county, so I'm certainly familiar with at least zoning principles in general. And if you actually look at some of the differences between the county and the city, a lot of our builders and folks who are responsible for that type of development have been spending a lot more time out in the county because they feel that the city's a little bit too restrictive. So I think the recode effort in part might be an opportunity to reduce a little bit of the restrictions to help allow our builders to make housing options a little bit more affordable. In addition, some of the proposals that have been before the City Council, particularly the walkability ordinances, while well intended, have the unfortunate potential side effects of really increasing costs. And I think when we have a city that's having a very serious shortage of workforce housing and affordable housing across the board, I think we want to make sure that we're not in a situation where we put so much restrictions in place where folks just end up going out to the county. Because certainly if folks are having to commute from further away as a result of the lack of affordability, it puts bigger strains on our infrastructure in terms of roads and other issues. So I think we want to make sure that we take a balanced approach to ensure that we can have affordable housing in the city.
Okay. Seema.
Can you ask me the question?
Sure, absolutely. Okay. In reviewing the city zoning policy, what will you hope will be the best long-term results of the zoning policies, and what principles should the city use to guide that policy?
Okay. What the city needs to use to guide those principles are what the people want. How we want to live needs to be reflected. And different people want to live in different ways, and that needs to be respected. I moved back to Knoxville because I like the city, but I also like to have some space and to live in a more small town feel. And that might not be what everybody wants. but I think recode, one of the things that I like about it is that it's not putting blanket zoning on things. It's looking at the individual communities and trying to suit that. What I would like to see come of it is the city, the codes that we have right now are about 60 years old. We've learned a great deal since then. And I think we need to use all of that experience and apply that to how we want the future of the city to look. We want it to be comfortable for all different sorts of people and affordable at the same time.
Right. So how would you respond to people saying that that there might be, that you could possibly overplan this and really limit what the free market or the a natural development of the city would be?
Natural development of the city is what's been happening. I don't think we can overplan it. I think we need to look at it. I think we need a lot of citizen involvement in it. It's pretty complicated. It's the structure of which we're going to live by. You have to have a structure and then put in how people want to live in different areas. So I don't think there can be too much planning.
Okay. Moving on to a bit of a different subject. This is about policing, safety, and community health. Recently, the Knox County Sheriff agreed to a 287G federal immigration and customs enforcement program to use local sheriff's officers to enforce federal immigration law. These programs allow officers to detain people in immigration violations and potentially begin their deportation process. While this is an obvious county issue, city police officers make most of the arrests in Knox County, and the Knox County Detention Facility is where the 287G program is purportedly going to be based. So this is where arrestees are going to wind up. What issues does this crossover cause for the city and the Knoxville Police Department? And does the city have a say in this? Seema?
It's not a city issue, but because we're in the county, it becomes a city issue, especially that there's a shared jail. So everyone that is arrested goes through the same jail system. I think we expect way too much of police officers. We expect them to do everything rather than focus on what their job is. I would like to see our resources used in preventing violence in the community versus going out and utilizing our taxes and resources to pulling in people who aren't causing any damage. And we may need as workers, as employees here.
Okay. And James?
Well, one thing that I get concerned of when we start talking about the overlap of issues is I think, especially being an election year coming up for the county in the next year, I think folks need to be aware of whose responsibility that is, and so they should be looking to the candidates who are running in that race. Now, that being said, we only have so much to say in terms of our officers get to make a determination as to whether or not they make an arrest. And at that point, I think our responsibility, or our control from the city government's standpoint ends. And given that just the jail overcrowding issues we have, and I do a lot of work with law enforcement officers, and as a result of my law practice, I think we're not spending a whole lot of time arresting people and incarcerating people on an emergency basis that aren't already, where it's already a safety issue. To a large extent, those discretionary issues, law enforcement in the city of Knoxville does a really good job of determining, is this someone that actually needs to go to jail now to make sure that everyone else stays safe, versus someone where we could simply write a ticket or notice someone to a court appearance. So to a large extent, I think we're sort of doing as much as we can be doing from the city end in terms of just making sure our officers are trained well enough to make that determination as to is jailing necessary on an emergency basis.
Thank you. So the city's currently examining, and turning back to planning economics, the city's currently examining how short-term property rentals such as Airbnb will be allowed to operate in Knoxville. There are a lot of competing interests between property owners and neighborhood residents. What principles would guide you in sorting through this issue to balance these competing interests? James?
Philosophically, I'm more of a free market type guy, but I believe that this is the job of being a city council person is a representative position. So, and one thing I've learned, especially as we've been expanding our focus from the district race to the citywide, is I think we've got a lot of different perspectives, especially as you go from neighborhood to neighborhood. For example, both candidates who made it out of the district race in District 2 in West Knoxville, the part of West Knoxville that's south of Middlebrook, outside of District 3, both of them are staunchly opposed to any short-term rentals in R1s and R1Es, so which is your traditional housing. And I think when you move to different parts of the city, especially as you get close to the city core, I think folks are a little bit more likely to be in agreement with it. So the one thing I'm wanting to make sure we stay away from is this one-size-fits-all approach. I think that we should allow the individual neighborhoods to have a greater say in what they want in their neighborhoods, because certainly some folks are very concerned that when they bought into a neighborhood, they want to know all their neighbors, they want to have that more traditional neighborhood feel, and there might be some more trendy type neighborhoods that are into the bed and breakfast. The other thing I think we need to make sure is that we have a commitment from everyone on the City Council to revisit this issue, because to a large extent it's new, and some folks might be more afraid of something that's happening that's new to them, and once we get a little bit more experience in dealing with the city, people's perspectives might change. So I do think it's something we need to revisit over the next several years.
Okay. And Seema?
There are different aspects to the short-term rentals. One is owner-occupied, which I support, and even in owner-occupied, there's the tourism industry, and then there's also people who do this to make more of an income, that they need it and they are dependent on it. So I do want to support that. The aspect of large developers buying up property that Knoxvillians need to live in, that concerns me.
Yeah. In what way?
Affordable housing. If they are buying up properties because the housing market's getting pretty tight right now in Knoxville, and one of the biggest reasons I moved back was affordability and quality of life, and I want people to still be able to come in for that reason and to enjoy life in that way. And by outsiders or developers taking properties that could be our housing and just using it as a rental, a short-term rental, I don't think that necessarily helps the neighborhood or citizens looking for housing.
Okay. All right, we're just about to come to the end of our segment, so we've got time for just one more question. In Knoxville, our city council elections allow citywide voting after district-only primaries. In 30 seconds or less, do you think this manner of voting is working for Knoxville, or should we take a second look at it? Seema?
I think we should always take a second look at everything. We should question everything and examine, what's going on. I know that it was established in the 60s trying to make sure that in East Knoxville there was a minority representation, and it's something. The system that we have is not present in other cities. It's pretty rare. I don't know. We need to look at it.
Yep.
It's complicated.
I think a little bit of it is obviously designed to fight that not in my backyard mentality, because there are certain things that we all need that might not necessarily be popular in terms of services like a jail, or like when we had the safety center in the 3rd district. But that being said, we've got a few at-large seats which certainly are designed to help prevent that. So I'm a little bit concerned that having this part where we pivot from making promises to the people in our district, and then we start expanding our focus, that we lose a little bit of our sense of representation and being responsible to the people who got us this far. So I quite frankly don't really like the system particularly, and I think a lot of people, because I've had to spend a lot of time just explaining to it. When we're going door to door, a lot of times I'm spending the first minute and a half of talking to people just saying, yes, you can vote for me. No, it's not a mistake that I'm here. And if we have to spend that much time explaining it, I have to wonder if there won't be a lot of people that haven't given a second thought until they actually get into the poll.
Right. Okay, well there you have it. Thank you for watching, and thank you to our candidates, Seema Singh Perez and James Corcoran. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day today. And don't forget, early voting starts on October the 18th, and Election Day is November the 7th. We'll see you at the polls.